Welcome to Nerdarchy for nerds, by nerds. I am Nerd Doug, and tonight I am getting all cultured with this nerd.
Nerdarchist Ted, how are you doing this fine and lovely evening, sir?
Fantastic. It's another great start to another new work week of Nerdarchy stuff. Another fine chat about a topic I like quite a bit with you.
As we get into, another a whole nother topic of culture, and what is that? What is that? Are we in culture shock or culture something else?
It's a pretty broad question. It's a big question. It doesn't have a lot of mechanical resources, I guess, in the core rule books, but it certainly does in setting books. It has a lot to do with that, and also bleeds over into players a lot too, at least in the games and experiences I like. It's not just a DM world building thing.
I would completely agree, because this is one of those things, especially when you're talking about a character background or the beginning of a story, or maybe even a session zero, talking about what is the culture of the place that you're starting in, or the place that you've started from, so that you've got things that you can bring along with you as a character experience, and again, background. And it's going to be very different of, are you a folk hero? Are you an urchin? Are you a noble? All of these things have a vastly different experience once you actually get to the point of, hey, now we're actually playing.
Right. And barring just like pickup games and one shots and stuff, but even a little bit of that to some extent, as we'll get into in this chat, I think those are hugely useful, again, to the players and the DMs. I mean, in our Tuesday night game with Stephen, he is a fantastic world builder, but I know he has also incorporated a lot of the just customs and things that we role play for our individual characters into that setting. And that's kind of, as a DM and myself, I love that stuff. Planets are pretty big places. So, saying like, well, there's no, gnomes in my world. It's like, nowhere, really? I mean, you can't just carve out a little thing and let the player, to give you their take on it. Maybe you'll like it, and there will be gnomes in your world, and they're very hidden, and they're not common, and that becomes like a cool part of the culture of your setting.
Well, there are those DMs who have particular races and archetypes that they don't particularly care for, and they don't want at their table because someone has taken it too far. And rather than try to work with a player and come up with a solution so that they don't do those things that annoy you as a DM, they just carte blanche. It's no.
Yeah.
And while I kind of have a problem with it, I also respect, the DM to say,
sure,
okay, this is how you do things. So, okay, I just won't play that race.
Absolutely. Yeah. I should clarify too. Yeah. I mean, I don't think like, oh, if you're, that kind of DM, screw you. But yeah, I've certainly played in games like that, and it's kind of fun too. I mean, there is so many choices for characters now as things go on. And when you get to play with different people, it is fun to be like, okay, well, that's their setting. That's where we're playing. So,
my wife doesn't tabletop anymore, but when she used to, one of the long, standing players that she did was a Kender. And she basically stole and moved things around the party's equipment list all willy-nilly. She had dating the DM, and it wound up being a fun little gag that she knew where things were the DM did, even if she didn't. So like there'll be times that someone will go to reach for something. It's like, it's not really there. I don't know if it ever led to any serious problematic events because it wasn't a game I was in. But she's told me the story a number of times, and it's humorous. But I would imagine for some at the table, might have a problem with that.
Yeah, as I say, that's pretty subjective. Like, yeah, as a player, I would think that would be kind of fun, even if it happened to me. Like, oh, I go to get this thing, and they're like, it's not there. I think that'd be fun, but that's kind of.
Damn it, Kender, what are you doing?
Yeah. And it's interesting, as we were talking, I was thinking like, and even many of my notes, sort of like touch on like, race aspects and things like that. But I mean, a culture really just means like the arts and customs of a region, for lack of a better term. So it's like, that doesn't need, maybe it's a cosmopolitan city where there's a lot of different, racial demographics coming and going, but they can still have their own unique culture. And again, as a player, I love when DMs even give you like a little taste of it. It can be pretty heavy-handed sometimes in games, where it's like, okay, I get it. Like, let's get to the playing. But having little things to like hang your character on, or like, that you might find interesting, is a huge benefit for players. I think I love it.
The word culture really comes with a broad stroke, because you can look at it as like, are we talking about society? Are we talking about religious? Are we talking about superstition? Are we talking about just, regular beliefs and cultures? There's so many different ways that you can approach that particular, aspect, that's like, you can do so much with it. And if you go into like real world, look at the Norse, the Vikings, and in a very fantasy-esque culture that somewhat correlates to how they view hobgoblins nowadays. It's very Raider-esque style.
Yeah, sure, I get that. In fact, we have some Norse kind of hobgoblins in our own Frost King book.
Because
at that point, but yeah, that's a good analogy.
A very cool concept. But then, like, when you look at, other real world things, like, look at the belief of people in Egypt versus, the people in Native American culture. There might be some similarities, but, a lot of things, both in how buildings are designed, what the day-to-day life is like, that are vastly different. And those are unique cultures that, for a fantasy writer, someone who's either making a character or making a campaign, that you could draw from and have something that's very unique and very interesting, and very stand out from everything else that's already been done.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There's so many kind of just like tropes or cliches in D&D, whether it's starting in a tavern or, saving the blacksmith's daughter or killing rats in the basement. But all of those things can be vastly different, depending not only on the players, but the setting that they're in too. I mean, like, what is the tavern like? And maybe people don't have basements for rats to even be in. And so they're in the attic. It's bats in the attic or whatever. I mean, you can, through the lens of like a culture, you can take a lot of just, ground that's been trod upon before and totally reimagine it in different ways. And players will respond different too, just from the way you describe things and the people who live there.
So now, all of that, I think, is a good solid start.
Sure.
If everything we're talking about isn't enough, obviously, we're only at the beginning of this thing, and we're going to keep going, and we're going to do some fun things. Going to hopefully throw Doug under the bus, and he'll do the same to me, and
sure,
what have you. But we've got a handful of videos over on the main channel of 3 ways to insert race here. We've got Goblin, Kobold, Dwarf, Orc, and Lizard Folk. There's even a playlist for 3 ways to monster, which doesn't have the dwarf on it, but it's got the other 4. And it's, as the name implies, 3 ways to kind of reinterpret the culture of those particular races and do something different for your world. It might be for all of them in your world, or it might just be, here's a different sect of them that have a unique way of doing things or a unique way of living, and hopefully it's designed to inspire you to make something else, so that the orcs or the dwarves or whatever in your world are different. So at some point in time, I think each of us should grab a race, and
sure,
like, okay, boom, and I'll throw it out to you, and you grab one and throw it out to me, and we'll come up with some unique interpretations of what that particular race should be.
Yeah. Along with those videos, as we often do, there's posts on the website that kind of like correlate with those and take them in different directions, or just somebody else's view of that. And I had been keeping up with that myself, with the goblins, the orcs, and the kobolds. And I found, it's interesting. I think it was Dave and I, maybe in one of the chats, it came up that, like, it's a little unusual that like the Dungeon Master's Guide just like leads in with like, how do you imagine the entire multiverse in your game with like all the planes and everything. But in that stuff, there's a lot of like interesting tables and charts, and I like kind of like weird plein air stuff. And at the time, I was also sort of like working on my own campaign setting, which I hadn't really, thought about like some of those uh, races and cultures per se, because they just never came up. So I thought I'd combine the two, and I was taking it from the angle of like, well, what if those cultures originally came from another plane? How would that have affected them, and then how did they get to the material plane, and like how do they operate now? So, and I just did a lot of random rolling. So I came up with Kobolds from Bitopia, which was I think that's like a plane where it's like inside of a sphere, sort of. So there's like, it's all like farmlands all around, but like the mountain tops like touch, and so like that are coming down. And so I just like figured, well, they're probably like really hardworking and they work the land and things like that. So I mean, like, and I know you're a fan of this too. It's like you can just find inspiration literally anywhere. Like how do you get from mechanists to orcs in your material plane? I don't know. Figure it out. Like just any of those little charts can just give you whether it was because they have like what the like government structure is. You can roll. It's like, is it a magocracy or a hierarchy or whatever? So yeah, you can come up with a lot of cool, and it incorporates those fantasy things more than just like it's a hamlet with all just human farmers or whatever. It's like maybe they migrated there from mechanists or something. So how does that make it different and cool and fantastical? Because my fantasy tastes are a long way from like a quasi medieval world. It's like, yeah, that's boring.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of in that same boat, especially right now. I've got, and I'll share a little bit about this. Not that it's going to ever be, at least not in any time near future, going to be
Sure.
on one of the games that we do on the channel. But through some of the games that I've been watching, a couple thought patterns have sparked the idea for this one particular city.
Okay.
We've talked about that. Starting with the new year, I've got a handful of games that are wrapping up and will be starting brand new with the turn of the year. Just happened to fall that way. And one of the pitches that I'm putting for a starting location is this place called Swampgate.
Okay.
It's this very, artificer, driven city, kind of like on the edge of like just before swampland. And as I started coming up with this idea, I was pitching some stuff to Dave, and he's like, "Well, why is this such a big location for people to go to? What has caused so many people to be here? Is there something in the swamp or in the region that is of high commodity and what have you?" So you've got this town where there's like the central like gear turned spire that literally twice a day, it's somebody comes out and literally turns the wheel to set the or to keep the gears moving. But there's like a wire around the entire city that has kind of like almost like a carnival ride, like with the little like ski lift kind of chairs, so you can observe everything from above, which allows you to see what's going on in the city as well as what's beyond. It's got the whole huge walls, but like inside there's all of this automation. You've got these wires that kind of go around the city, also go from building to building. There's clockwork birds that have these little mechanical nests that are attached to these wires that can charge them so they can send messages or deliver small parcels. You've got actual heated elements that aren't just a wood fire stove. So like all of your cooking things could actually be more electrical or magical or a combination thereof. We've got or I've got, things along the lines of, oh, what about an automated, music player that you could put in like discs that
Mm.
select what track that you want to listen to and that kind of stuff. Um,
Yeah, and that's interesting, like cultural thing, because that tells you something too. It's like, well, they that's something that the people value, like having access to like music. I mean, that could be something that you draw on for a lot of inspiration. It's like, sure, they have a lot of technology or magical power, but they chose to,
right.
Even those little things that they chose to make. Why? It's like, maybe it's because it's kind of a harsh life there on the frontier, and that's like soothing to people or whatever. But when you start asking yourself, like, well, why am I doing this? That's how you come up with like cool cultural things, I think.
So I'm having a lot of fun. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still in the infantile stages of its development, but I'm liking what I've got so far. It's the first time I'm actively saying, "Hey, let's play a D&D game," and I'm okay with having firearms as a thing. So I'm like, "Yep, let's throw that out there and see what sticks." And
Oh,
who
I would, for what, it's such a, I'm so used to like thinking fantastic. I was thinking like arms made out of fire when you
oh.
said that. I was like, isn't that just a four elements monk thing?
Nope, guns, rifles, you
Sure.
know. Um,
Oh, speaking of which, this is, and actually, I'll even relate it to culture. So Stephen had asked me to guest in his Thursday night quill and sword game, which takes place in the same world as our Tuesday night
yep.
game. And so, and he's very much into the world building culture, and they're in a sort of like French inspired region right now when I'll join them. So, um, I like to look up like Pinterest and like just to get ideas for characters. And I settled on, it's basically an artificer who's like a city guard. And, I found a lot of these art that I like of like knights, but they have rifles, he doesn't have firearms in this thing. But I was like, well, the artillerist, I think it's actually meant to be like this, but it's like you can take a wand or a staff and use it as like, your arcane weapon. Basically, you can shoot a force blast and focus your spells through it. And I was like, well, I'll just have a staff that's carved like rifle-esque, that he holds like that, and then just all the spells that he has is like firebolt and ray of frost and things like that, like the
Cool.
combat stuff. But what really helped me is like him giving me those cultural things, like that it's French inspired, and that it's like just what the city looked like and how the people were, and that really helped me come up with a character that I not only had like cool powers, but I was like, this seems like I got a sense of like who they are, like
Right.
being from that city, and especially when you're playing in like a one shot like that as a guest, it's like, well, I want to bring something to the table, so having that cultural stuff was a lot more important than like, how many magic items can we have and stuff like that.
Yeah.
To me, I'm super helpful.
And I'm the kind of player, and Dave is, kind of razzed me a number of times where I'll write lengthy backgrounds. Legitimately, he ran a one shot, and I wrote like a 4-page backstory, and he's like, "What the hell am I going to do with a 4-page backstory for a one shot?"
I get it, man. It's as much for you as the DM too, right? It's like, hey, this is what I came up with to like help me get in the shoes of this character, and I'm just giving it to you because like maybe you'll like it. I don't know.
I don't want to step into a 15th level character without knowing who the hell, and that's what that was. So I'm like, you know what, I can do this.
Yeah, you want to think like, how did this guy get to that point?
So
and like how much, and it helped, again, especially at a higher level, it's like it just might give you some guidance on like what would they do in this situation if you at least thought about like how did they arrive here, what experiences have they had.
So Parks has got a question. You might be a better adept at answering it.
All right.
Has been characterized as a playable race yet? I don't recall ever seeing one, and was just wondering.
Well, not officially, an official source, but around here we don't really care if something's official or not. And there's a huge number of people that have made playable mechanisms. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a post on nerdarchy.com about that very thing. There certainly is in that really cool book you have it. It's like all about like subterranean stuff, and it had like really poppy art, and this maybe from like 2 years ago, what I'm talking about? It had like Mike and Ids and all that kind of stuff. So while he's looking for that, another thing.
Kobold or not a kobold?
Nah, it was. I don't remember who it was, but it was. I want to say the cover's maybe like grayish, like stone looking, and it had a lot of like really vibrant art. But a lot of those kind of, I'll say, like hybrid, plant and animal type races. There's a 5e hack called Hyperlanes that I like a lot. There's several articles on the site about it. And there's a whole sort of like race builder system. And it has like, samples of like fungal people, spider folk, and this and that. But there's also just like a method of like cobbling together your own race with like, there's different traits and abilities that you can add to it. But yeah, as just conceptually, I think that's awesome too. And even if you don't have like a true Myconid thing, but you want to stick to official, I'd say a Spore Druid, and then just reflavor a race that has things that do like what you want. For instance, I think Myconids communicate with like spore telepathy of a sort. So maybe you take something like that, like the Ghost Wise Halfling or the new Gem Dragonborn that have telepathy, and you just reskin it. Other than it being scaly and having floating horns or being, a small or whatever, you're just looking for things that, represent what your idea of a Myconid is. But I played a Spore Druid for several years, and that was one of my favorite characters ever. So I'm totally advocating for you, Parks. Do it, and your dad will be proud.
So I was able to find, actually by Kobold on the Underworld Player's Guide.
Maybe that is it. Does it have like a different take on Drow, and there's like a fungal? Okay, that is it then. That's Kobold?
So it is Kobold Press.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was somebody else.
And it has the Mushroom Folk.
And that's a pretty cool book.
You can play the Acid Cap, or you can play the Morel. So you've got two different options. But there's a lot of fun races that are in this particular book. You've got Darrakol, Dark Trollkin, Darrow, Dampier, Drow, Mushroom Folk, the Children of Nidhogg, as well as Shade. And then there's some subclasses in it.
Really? I didn't know it had that kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
And knowing Kobold, they probably have little tidbits of like cultural stuff attached to those that can also give you cool ideas.
So this is what you're looking for.
That's a good book. And it's probably not too much being a softback.
According to this, it's showing a MSRP of $19.99.
Yeah, but you could probably get like a drive-through RPG PDF for like $9.95 or something. In another way, it's not that hard to sort of make your own playable race if you just look at the stat block and, just break it down. It's like, well, they're wiser and more con, so that's probably where their stat bonuses would be.
But if you're also going with the current tradition, put them wherever you want.
Yeah, true.
We will always say, if we're making a race, this is what the suggested should be, but do with as you will, because that's our mentality.
Which, interestingly enough, one of my bullet points touches on that very thing, because and this kind of ties back to last week's topic of the evolution of D&D. Somebody on our Facebook page had expressed that like they didn't really like that because like in their world, like hill dwarves are tough and strong, or whatever. Paladins, like they like the old way where they're lawful good, and I get that, and it's like you can still do that. I think it's cool that they're going in this new direction though, because it's like, well, it like kind of puts it in the DM's hands, like, well, what do you think the dwarves are like in your world? And maybe you can work with the players too. It's like, if it's a new game and somebody wants to play a dwarf and they want to put it in like charisma and dex, it's like, okay, well, and again, that doesn't have to be like cultural or biological either, but maybe it is. Maybe you think like, oh, well, the dwarves are very outgoing and they're quick and nimble because they are craftspeople and they do finer work or whatever. They're tinkers. I do think it would be cool though, and they probably I wouldn't be surprised if they do have some kind of recommended, thing that would say like what the player's handbook we have now suggests, if only for the fact that a lot of people have expressed that they want that explicit thing. They're like, why can't you put the recommended thing?
Right.
And I think that would be good because like not everybody wants to be that, delve that deep into imagination and thinking that stuff. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's like maybe you just want to pick it up and like, sure, orcs are tough and elves are smart. Okay, let's play, which is fine too.
And that's all well and good. And if you want to play someone that's off type, and you want to come up with the cool story
Mm-hmm.
of, okay, well, I dumped Khan and I'm playing a dwarf. Well, either have a reason why your character is more sickly.
Right.
I'll go back to the the tropiest of tropes when it comes to dumping Khan Raceland.
Yeah.
Like, were you sick? Did something happen, in your village, and everyone else seemed to recover, but you didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Having some kind of cool story with why you are below norm,
yeah,
for your race, when you're known for having a good whatever this
right.
But
on a macro level, if you wanted to look at it like from a cultural level, it's like maybe, for whatever reason, those people, and it doesn't have to be the same race, but maybe just like people that settled in places that are vastly different from where they came from, and they're just affected that way. Like maybe the elves in your world come from like the astral plane, like those astral elves. It's like they just float around. There's not a lot of gravity and stuff. So when they're on the material plane, it's like, yeah, we seem weaker because
right.
I can't just like think my way into moving and stuff like that. So again, you can find those cool like cultural things in the mechanics of the game. I think there was a couple questions going on. Cups asks, what is the rate of leveling up at levels 1st through 4th? The party they run has had about 5 to 6 major fights and a bunch of encounters besides, and they are now level 3. I think we both could offer cool perspectives on that, but I'll cede the floor to you.
So I don't take the time to calculate XP anymore. It's not fun, and it's not a really elegant system, as as some have put it, because if you give them really tough fights to kind of keep things moving, and you're giving XP for the same amount of challenges for RP and exploration, they're going to level really, really fast. So I tend to just say, forget milestone, forget actually XP based on encounters. I do it where I feel works for me as the GM. It might be at an odd point. It might be, hey, you guys have finished a fight and you're about to go into another one. You guys can level up. So somehow in the middle of a fight, you've somehow taken a long rest and you feel invigorated, but you're ready to go. So what? Don't care.
Yeah.
This is my story. Just move on. With the Dungeons and Delving sessions or season that I ran, here on the channel, it was a set, thing. You guys are going to level every time you come out of the dungeon. We knew it going in. That's how it's going to be, so that when you were ready for the next time, go ahead and make sure you're leveled up. So you've got the ability to set up whatever you think makes sense for your specific thing. 5 to 6 fights, and has gotten you 2 levels. That could be accurate. How many sessions is that? If that's 2 sessions, I think you're leveling too quickly by my accounts.
But to your point, by like XP calculation, that's probably right. I mean, 6 fights when you're first level to get the 3rd level, it's like that ain't a lot. I mean, that's like a couple of bandits, maybe 1 or 2, like a brown bear, and like a goblin shaman or something. It's like, boom, you're level 3. I mean, it goes pretty quick. I'm with you a lot of the ways. I'm for many of the same reasons. Like XP, like just straight out of the book D&D, and I'm not talking about like optional guidance in the DMG. You only get XP from killing monsters, and over the years, I've, realized like there's times when players just, Dragon Warrior, Nintendo game, and we're like, well, I only need 5, so can I just go out and kill like a fox or like a slime or something? And it's like, that's just dumb. I mean, it's like the character wouldn't know that. Like, if I just kill one more small thing, I'll gain more power, so narratively, it doesn't make sense. And yeah, I'm like you, where it's like, I'll call it milestone, but I mean, the DMG suggests, like you actually set milestones, which is another way you can do it. And that's the way that the adventures do now. Because it's like, you don't know what the players are going to do or how many, maybe they'll avoid all the fights. But if they reach this point in the story or the adventure, then they level up. Like Dragon Heist is the one that comes most to mind, where it's like, when you get Troll Skull Manor, you level up. Like when the fireball goes off in the street, you level up. It just tells you when you do. And yeah, and that's just them doing the same thing that you described. Where it's like, you just know when it seems like it, right? Unless and you can get a lot of mileage out of having some structure to your campaign. We have several videos about that, where it's like, in your Dungeons and Delvings, just like that. It's like, it's 12 sessions. I know I want them to progress somewhat. You knew we were going to have like action-packed things every other time. So it's like, okay, well, we'll just level up, because no matter what we did, we were going to be challenged and fight things and stuff. And also have a whole session of like role-playing and exploring. So
I ran the second campaign that I ran was very similar to the Dungeons and Delving. It was 12 episodes or 12 sessions, and that was done in a very similar manner, where like every other episode we were leveling. I keep saying episode, but we didn't film it. It's
but I know it's tough to make that distinction.
So they started at level 4, and going into the final encounter, I leveled them again. So they basically leveled at end of 8, and then again, end of 10, and then end of 11, so that they could go into the final battle at 10. And then those characters that decided to continue onto the story with the next campaign, we bumped everybody to 11, and whoever wanted to make new characters just made new characters.
Yeah.
And that's the campaign that we're getting ready to wrap up. In fact, this upcoming Saturday. So kind of excited to kind of see that story wrap up and see where things kind of go from here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've crossed the halfway point.
Oh, okay. Wow. That came up quick. I didn't even get to half my stuff. So.
Oh, yeah. So I've got a lot of business.
Okay. Yeah. Go for it, man.
So I'm going to go quick.
Sure. Take time.
So it is the first of the month. And if you're, familiar with us, you know what that means. It's time to give away stuff. And boom, I've got 2 special edition covers here. One for The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and for Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. And this awesome pile, it's only 2 books, but it's a great thing.
Yeah.
And that is going to be going to Dominic Souza. I have not sent out the email yet, but I will be emailing you. And once I have your address, I will send these your way free of charge. Thank you for signing up for the newsletter. And as always, signing up for our newsletter or being a patron automatically enters in. If you happen to have both, that's twice the chances of getting in. And you've got to kind of like do that double entry thing to make sure that you're into, the full list, so that you get things. But along with that list, it is also it is Dave's month to get with the fans. And if I look at the calendar, November 28th is the final Sunday of the month, 2 p.m. And I apologize, but some of the people who signed up for the list only gave a single name. So if you happen to be one of those people that I read off on the list and you didn't give a last name, well, then so be it. But we've got Scott, Randy Wapperam, Mitchell Earnshaw, Adam Dunigan, John Kostick, Pedro Mayas Jr., Reagan, Will Barr, Michael, and Mika McName. And I apologize if I've incorrectly pronounced or butchered your name. It is just me not being able to read well and, pronounce well as well. But Dave has already been sent the information. He will be in contact with you if your name is on that list. And it's usually the first, 4 to 5 people who respond get a chance to game, and he'll give you all of the information in regards to what character level and setting and all of that jazz.
Yeah, that is a nice giveaway. Yeah, it's not as filled with a bunch of different stuff, but those are 2 really great books that just came out, and 2 very different books too.
And it's the special edition covers all lumped together. Yeah. We have some things that are entering onto the giveaway shelf. I do believe Dave took pictures and was sharing this out.
Cool.
Yeah. But we've got the new Dungeon Master screen that comes with some cool inserts, as well as the Wild Beyond the Witchlight dice, which I really love. They happen to have a very cool orange and purple theme.
Mm-hmm.
The cards that are in here, because I got the set that I bought for myself before these showed up. Otherwise, I would have claimed them for me. But the cards in there have some expanded games that you can play at the carnival itself. So really useful. So these are going on to the giveaway shelf to go to somebody at some point in time.
Yeah, I like that Witchlight adventure kit a lot. The stuff they have, like the little kit that comes with the cards and all that. I think it really makes it like a fun kind of almost like a standalone game. I just keep circling back to that thought. I mean, it's still D&D, but it's like, yeah, with the little tickets and all that and the fold-out map. That's a super cool package.
So a couple weeks ago was Free RPG Day, and I forgot to kind of show these things off. So if you have a local flags and you didn't go support Free RPG Day, they might still have some stuff lurking around. Go check it out and ask. If not, you might lurk around the interwebs. But I picked up the thing for Vast Grim by our
nice
friend over at Creature Curation and Infinite Black, the Epic Encounter, The Hills Have Legs, as well as the Sunken Temple of Set.
Ooh, that looks cool.
Fun little adventure things that I'm adding to my collection, and things that might see some things here and there.
Yeah, that's some fun stuff.
So I backed a Kickstarter from Legendary Games, so Asian Monsters. So I'll be seeing some what kind of cool things might I be throwing at my players.
Nice.
And then I've already mentioned how awesome Kobold Press is, and I've got a stack of stuff here.
Is this all going in the giveaway vault, or
no? This is stuff going on the shelf.
Oh, okay.
But I've got my creator copy for Vault of Magic, which I do believe one of these is going to be coming to us for the shelf. But
if you didn't know yet, Ted designed one of the items in there.
I did. So if you happen to get the one and you want me to sign it, I'll sign it. Wherever you want. I always find it weird, but when it's actually something that I was a part of, totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And then the Southlands trio.
Oh, okay, cool.
Is some cool stuff, and we like showing off, all of Kobold stuff because they're awesome people.
Yeah, they make good solid stuff. Which can
So that kind of work aside, you'll see things kind of move and rotate, here and there. I wanted to show that stuff off because you guys should get to see the cool things that kind of happen behind the scenes and what have you.
So I, one of my kind of go-to website posts that I always try to, just fill out and catch up is making a post for all of our CBGs, because there's a lot of them. Our character build guides, we got over 60 of them now. I can't believe that. We've been doing them for over 3 years, man. I was looking at them today. The Mindbreaker Paladin was the first one. But the other day, pretty high up on the website, if you go and poke around the blog, it was for the Whirling Dervish. Do you remember that one?
Oh, absolutely.
One of the first ones we did. And that one, so if you don't know our character build guides, they're character build guides for 1 through 20, but they're not like they only get good at 20. I mean, it's like many of them right off the bat at first level, we're like, I'd totally play this character right now. They got cool. And we always sort of determine like, okay, well, at this point, it's like it hits the mark what we're going for. And it's usually like, on average, it's like 7th level. So, you get awesome at your stuff when most campaigns end. But the Whirling Dervish, so the narrative hook that we hooked that on was somebody that was I think that actually it was a request from somebody in the community to make a barbarian rogue.
Right.
And so we were like, just trying to think of like a cool story. And the Tomb of Annihilation had just come out, and it had the anthropologist background in it. And we thought, well, what if this is somebody who was an anthropologist and they just sort of like immersed themselves in this new culture and picked up their ways. And in that way, it's not so much like a barbarian rogue multi-class. It's like, well, combine those things, make this different fighting style. So like
Right.
It's sort of looking at rage through a different lens of like being like, just an adrenaline fueled dance of whirling blades. And I just really have a lot of fun with all those CBGs for that reason. It's like they do cool stuff mechanically, but it's often like the reasons why we make the character and make the choices along the way that are the most interesting to me, because they are based on those sorts of things.
I have to say that the Whirling Dervish is one that has kind of been on my not my radar, but like on my thoughts as something that I want to do eventually. But the fact that I've been playing a character for over 2 years that is a barbarian already, it kind of feels like I'd be stepping on my toes, and I want to make something else. I've got a laundry list of characters.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Every time we read a new book, or we we do another character build guide, like a lot of things like, oh, that could be interesting, and what do I do with that, and what's my own personal twist beyond what we've already come up with to kind of make
I was just thinking of one today. I wrote it down somewhere else, but I was gonna hit you up because it just crossed my mind.
All right, so we've got 19 minutes left. So
okay,
I'm gonna push things aside, and I'm gonna go. Do you want to throw a race at me, or do you want me to throw a race at you first?
I'll go with you first because I'm not as good at that kind of stuff, like coming up on the fly. So, do you want like you want just like a playable race?
So anything that we've got, a stat block or what have you, for whether it be monster or whether it be player.
Oh.
You say, take this race, and if I know it enough, I'll just come up with something. If not, I'll quick pull it up on D&D Beyond and give a look through of what we know, and I'll take a twist in a different direction. So what do you?
All right, give me a moment to look this over. You can just talk to the chat for a second while I ponder.
So I brought up Vikings earlier, and we talked about the real Vikings, history, mythology, all of that stuff. But you've also got the direction of, well, what if you go Vikings fantasy, and you look at the shirt that I'm wearing? I don't know how well it shows, but it's like the How to Train Your Dragon style. Like that would be a whole nother take on how to take a real world culture and put that into a fantasy scenario situation, and have it be something that could be very cool, very interesting, and be like, all right, this could totally fit in a D&D world. These things are probably more drakes than dragons, but like this is even a thought pattern that I've got for a game is How to Train Your Drake, and I would make a whole new set of wyverns or something smaller for the players to actually ride.
Okay, so I got one. It's a newer thing. It's a playable race, and I don't believe there's much baggage behind it as far as like expectations. I'll give you the Herongan.
The Herongan.
Yeah.
Right. So we have got this race of rabbit folk, and what do we know about them beyond that they live in the Fae?
Let's see. They're bipedal. They have keen senses and powerful legs. They're full of energy like a wound-up spring. They're blessed with a little Fey luck. And that's pretty much it.
All right, so it says, not all Herongan are mean-spirited bullies like the ones presented here. Every Herongan follows their own path through life. Their disposition shaped by a part of the company they keep. One Herongan might travel to lands far away, make friends along the way, delight in freedom of the open trail, and find inner peace. Another might become an adventurer with a strong heart and fervent dreams.
Where are you reading it? In the Wild Band, the Witch?
So I went to the Herongan Brigand. And
okay.
Pulled up.
I got you.
some kind of information.
Sure.
So anytime you're looking at an animal folk, that you're looking at things that are based off of uh that are based off of an animal that we know. But what if you were to have, as opposed to a culture that is entirely sedentary, what if you kind of take the mythos of the turtle versus the hare, and you kind of just like, well, they are in perpetual motion. So the Harengon are completely nomadic, and it's not because they're following a herd. It's not because that they feel like they have to move where weather or where food is, but it's a more spiritual journey, something within themselves. They cannot put down roots. If the rabbit itself is something that is always running from burrow to burrow and always moving, what if the actual humanoid, they feel that they can't lay ties to anywhere, or insert whatever supernatural or cultural belief leads them to believe that something bad is going to happen, and that they must pack up the wagon or pack up the whatever their pack animals are, and they move to another area, or they're constantly in these tent-like cities or it's not cities but towns, and always have to be in motion. And perhaps some people don't like that, because whenever they happen to move into another area, whatever foodstuffs they eat, whether it be vegetable or animal, it's going to be a drain on the resource of whatever area that they're now laying claim to, that might technically belong to somebody else. So does an aspect of them almost become raider-esque? Do they have to become more martial to be able to defend and take over things? So like the culture has the ability to kind of ebb and move and flow based on what is necessary, based on the areas that they're moving into.
All right.
That works?
Sure.
All right. So I wanted to throw an idea at you.
Okay.
And it's mainly because there's already been a lot of differences. So I'll give you an easier one if you don't like this one.
Okay.
But Aarakocra.
Aarakocra.
Now we saw the vulture-like Aarakocra, in the earlier editions of D&D, and especially with 5e, they've made them far more noble and made them look more eagle-like. And there's been a lot of talk of, oh, well, what if I want to make it towards this bird, towards that bird? And, then Robin did a spectacular job of making, the village in the Those Bastards game, that I really want to kind of flesh out and make a real location to do something with at some point in time, because I really dig that particular city. But there's a lot of different directions that you can take, but there's not a whole lot of groundwork, and pun intended, flying bird race, of what the Aarakocra are right now. So what do you think?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I also like that, and I see a lot of players that play them. It's like, yeah, they're basically just like bird, bird, whatever kind of bird theme you want. Sort of like how you guys are talking in today's video. It's like, sure, Dragonborn are like brown scaled, but it's like, does anybody ever play like that? I don't. So it's like, sure, they're usually depicted in art as like eagle-like in 5th edition, but I'm totally with that thing. And because of that, I would probably look to. It's tricky because it's very easy to, with the animal races, to just look at like the animal and like their kind of behavior. But I sometimes try to avoid that when I'm doing it, because it's like, but they're also people, It's like we don't act like chimps because we're similar to well, I guess maybe we do behaviorally, But yeah, something like that. I don't know. I mean, it's hard not to assume they have a society that like involves a lot of flight and everything. But like culturally, I guess they would probably have a lot of. I would imagine them having a lot of like nonverbal uh, parts of their culture because birds communicate a lot by like just like if their feathers bristle or even how they bob their head or chirp and things like that. And playing off that idea of having like they're just different varieties of birds. I could see it becoming like well, not so much like a case system, but there is birds that are just better at doing certain things. There's birds that can't fly as fast. So I think that's probably where I would look to develop their culture. Like, the birds that are more eagle like the traditional one probably would be more of people that or the ones that would be looked to as like protective and things like that.
Sure.
Um, but as far as like the environment they live. I think and they come from the plane of air and the lore, and they often they live on like mountains often. I would just take them away from that, and maybe they, you know, make it like more flatland. I mean, they can still that might be even more interesting because like a bird in flight on flatland can see very far, so they would probably have wide regional lands and not live close together and stuff because they can travel
Right.
to and fro. They probably, and because of that, though, they're also, with their flight, they can't carry a lot. So it would probably be a leaner culture. Maybe not even nomadic, but yeah, but like birds again, they tend to nest and stuff, but they have wide ranging areas, and I would probably go with something like that just to change it up. Like they're not just coming down from their mountain eyries. It's like maybe they just live on like a coast. That might be cool, and like you know, they could easily like have a different methods of fishing and stuff like that because they could just literally they dive like birds of prey into the water. So that might be kind of cool.
I think that could be pretty awesome. I like the idea of the kind of coastal Aarakocra that that are more fisher birds.
Yeah,
I think that could be pretty interesting. And on a coastal scenario, I think that could be very cool. I would love to.
you could sort of like tie them to just the rest of the world too. It's like maybe it's like customary, to I don't know, like what's the word I'm looking for? Not pay homage, but like treat Aarakocra with goodwill if you're going to go on like a sea voyage because it's like you might get trapped out there and they could see your ship from far away and like they sort of watch the coast and things like that. Maybe their natural enemies are like Sahuagin or some undersea creature that when they surface they're always scanning for that watching out for people like lesser weaker creatures on the shore. I don't know.
Absolutely. I would love to see them, number one, fix Aarakocra, and while they're fixing it, treat it with the same brush that they did with the races in the Wild Beyond the Witchlight. Like, oh well, can I make a small or medium Aarakocra and have more than just a flight and a stupid ability that rarely is going to get used.
I think a lot of that stuff's going to be in that evolution with like the size thing because it's like it doesn't really matter that much. I mean, I'm sure in the chat or if this was on Reddit, there could be a lot of edge cases of like, well, if you can squeeze through space and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, okay. But does that really come up in your game? I mean, and if it does, great. But in my experience, that stuff almost never is relevant.
The only time size comes up is can I ride it or can it swallow?
Yeah, right.
Can I ride it or can it swallow you? That's about it. Anything beyond that size has not really mattered to me in the games that I've played. But I like the idea of swallow and finch type smaller things that maybe they don't fly, maybe they only have a glide speed and some smaller abilities, and really sub race it out and have some fun, and really turn it into something that's got some serious culture of its own. Maybe give it the caste system that you were talking about, where like they have their own place. Like this is where Aarakocra dwell, and maybe originally the Kenku belonged as part of the Aarakocra, and they were cast out because of the
whatever curse befell them. Yeah, and you can take that little bit of lore and like now you can expand it and make it unique for your world. It's like, well, how do they fit in your world?
right. So I think
that actually reminds me, and is tied to the only other point I really wanted to make tonight,
sure.
Which was about my own little setting that I'm always like tinkering with, and when I play games, it's more or less set there. Is the idea of like when you're world building, I think it's very interesting to look into like real world cultures, especially like your own. For instance, I'm Slovenian, so I was like, I don't know anything about Slovenian mythology or Slovenia, the country, or anything, and it was hugely, cool and influential. Every culture has like myths and folklore, but also just for like, and believe me, it really helps like sell the sizzle, and players have often responded well. Of just like what their houses look like. Like I'll just, because it's like a seaside town, I always describe it's like they're painted in pastel yellows and greens and pinks, which they are in like Slovenia, and like the way their roofs are constructed. I'm talking about like traditional style things, and even like traditional garb. And not everybody in my town is human. It's like there's just all sorts of people that live there, but they all are that culture because that's where they're from. And usually the first couple of sessions with the new group, they just love like hanging around time. You've played in it. It's like I never have like a plot per se, because it's just like they just getting to know the town and getting to know the people. They have lots of things that is going on, and that they know about the area. So I just like to see what players are interested in. But knowing your setting and having those little cultural clues of just like, for instance, there's like a lime trees are very prominent in like Slovenian culture, and not like the limes, it's this other kind of wood and stuff, but they have a distinctive bulb, and like they use that in their architecture, and like even they have like a special kind of cheese that's traditionally in the shape of that, and just all those little things make you feel like you're there, and that's why players really respond to, and they want to hang out there and learn more about the people and help them, so that it's super beneficial.
So, getting back to, that term of culture is making something, as, you're taking influence from real world, making a culture, making a setting unique and your own, because it has a rich, deep culture, is going to allow you to make something that your players want to interact with. They're going to they will want to explore. They will want to know more about what you've created and why.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it more real, so that when they sit down at the table and they're rolling dice, it's in a place that is as real as you can possibly make it.
Yeah, we talked about our Tuesday night games, and like all of them really have had, cultural elements. I would say, even yours, even being like an enclosed place, it's like there was elements of the way people thought about things and did things, and certainly Robin's game was hugely immersive in that way, and Stevens too. The Minotaur, when we went to their cities, and like the way the dwarves live underground, and
I would say all of them had a unique, culture, a unique world,
yeah,
a setting.
Moon rises.
Like you could do anything with. Yours. You had us going all over, and I don't think anything. Like I know, Gardenia was something that, you took inspiration from, but I don't think anything is as unique as that we've gamed in. But like if you even if you look at your original Spelljammer game, everything was just as unique and fun and interesting. And I've seen it now 3 times. So,
yeah.
It's really good to watch.
And those are good like practices as a DM too, because having all your calculated encounters or whatever, that's great, and it is helpful. But when you just know the area where the characters are, that does a ton of heavy lifting for you, because you just know, like, if they go here, what it looks like or what the people there are like, and those are things for the players to bounce off of. and then they'll discover their own story. And that's, for me as a DM, that's what's really fun. Like I gave up long ago, like, oh, I don't know, they're going, I didn't think they'd go this way. I've told this story a bunch. My first 5e campaign, first session, first thing they did, and I spent a lot of time, like, again, working on the culture of this little town so they would be cool. They just wanted to go away right away, immediately. Like, first thing we started playing, they were like, let's get out of here. And I just learned right then, like, okay, like, it's much better to know the setting than to have, like, you know,
it's so hard. It's so hard to know whether the players are going to want to lurk around the inn for an hour and a half, or whether they're going to, you know, GTFO right away.
Yep.
And I've had games that have gone both directions. I'm watching episode 3 of the Elder Scrolls game on Critical Role.
Those are fun.
You know, they're a blast to watch, but like, you know, usually like the first half hour, 45 minutes is just them kind of dicking.
Yeah, right.
This. And
well, they have the benefit. I'm often envious of Critical Role, not for their fame or fortune, but just the fact that like their group, you know, you're gonna come together every week. You know, you have you can go on as long as you want. It's like if they had the campaign going for 5 years, people would still tune in. Yep. So you can just take your time and really explore those cultures, those settings, and you're not feeling like, look, man, you know, this is only 10 sessions. We didn't even do anything. It's like, you know, and to this point, like a lot of the D&D books, Volo's, Van Richten's, you know, the Ravnica and everything, have a lot of cultural guidance, even for making your own, like with the domains and coming up with your own culture. But I must say, the Wildmount book out of them all has the most amount of that stuff, where it's like, that's a real setting.
There's plenty of culture on Dragon.
Yeah, there is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
So, you know, it's however you want to play it. And, you know, remember, if your DM has done some legwork and created a cool culture, don't just throw it out of hand. See what it's about. You know, investigate the world, not just go kill monsters.
Yeah.
You know, and
you can see that practice in action tomorrow night in our game. I rely on Stephen's cultural stuff a lot to play Desatricos.
You know, everything about that particular setting is pretty darn fantastic. Yeah. You know, other than the fact that I have yet again decided I'm going to play a very magic-heavy person in a world where they hate magic.
Magic's just fun, man. I'm with you, dude. It's hard to, and not because like you can control minds. It's like, no, man, you just do all kinds of cool stuff. I love all the weird spells, you know, just things you can do. It's fun. It's hard to resist.
I've gone as magic-heavy as I can on this particular character, and you know, it's like every time I turn around, it's like, oh, I got him who's traveling with us, who hates everything that I do. This is gonna be
But it makes for fun role playing.
Absolutely, it does. But unfortunately, this might be a culture shock, but we have actually crossed our deadline. Is after 9 o'clock. So we will be back. We've got, you know, more live action fun or more live interview fun throughout the rest of the week, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, with Dave doing the live chat. As well as you know, Doug has already said, we'll be back tomorrow night with you know,
Ashes of Ardor.
Ashes of Ardor. Thank you. I was totally blanking on the name. Like Ardor cool. Something. No, it's something of Ardor. So without further ado, until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.